Hi, my name is Corey Olson. I'm owner and CEO of Infuzion Solutions. And today we're going to give you a sneak peek on our new wine and spirits solution built on Business Central. We've been in the Microsoft channel for over 20 years. We're located in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we specialize in creative solutions throughout the whole Microsoft stack. We specialize in distribution, not-for-profit, higher education, and healthcare, but we have a tailored solution for wine and spirits wholesalers. Up to now, that's been built on Microsoft Dynamics GP. We work with over 20 wine and spirits distributors across the U.S., and we offer consulting services on business processes, integration services, Power Platform development, and of course support both Microsoft Dynamics GP and now Business Central. Today, I'm really excited to show you some sneak peeks in this new solution we built that leverages the best of Business Central, 365 Wine Trade, and some custom solutions we have added for integrations, reporting, and other things that meet the needs of our wine and spirits wholesalers. I'm really excited to show you this new feature today. I hope you enjoy it. Talk about is I'm calling it today chargebacks. There's so many different terminologies that are used in the industry. Billbacks, depletion allowances. The way that 365 Wine Trade has built this into Business Central is using what they call a chargebacks module. Underneath there, the types of chargebacks that they do are depletion allowances, so DAs, we'll go into detail on that. Billbacks, which is what they call samples. Bad bottles, we'll briefly overview that today. And then our Infuzion customizations added free goods as well. We do have some states that still process free goods for that. So those are kind of the types of chargebacks. So again, getting our terminology straight for what I'm going to present today, the whole module and process itself we're calling chargebacks. Individual like billback is a sample into that. You'll probably hear me catch myself because we often just call all of them billbacks. So anyway. The other thing that's really different about our solution in Business Central versus the way we do that in our Infuzion GP solution is that currently right now, when you bill back the supplier, those chargebacks are an AR entry because they're going to owe you money. Now, 50% of the time, for some of you maybe more, some of you maybe less, the supplier doesn't actually pay you any money back. You end up transferring that over to purchasing and applying it against what they owe you in a purchase credit memo. So 50% of the time people are like, I really wish this would live in the AP side of the world. And 50% of the time people are like, oh, it's great that it lives over in the AR side of the world. In this solution, we're starting with that to become a purchase credit memo. So it's going to go in the AP side of the world, where in our Infuzion GP side, we chose the path for it to be an AR. You're still going to have the ability to switch it back and forth, just like you do in Infuzion. But this at least will start here in the purchase credit memo. So that's another big change to that. The other probably biggest change is that everything I'm going to show you today is inside of Business Central. So right now in our Infuzion GP side of the world, you use an Excel integrated workbook and you pull everything outside of the system. Everything I'm going to show you is living inside of the system for what we're going to process through. So let's first talk about our chargeback setup. So I'm going to go into my 365 Wine Trade menu. This was a native solution to 365 Wine Trade who built this inside for Business Central. And then we worked with them to make several modifications that I'll point out to you for our Infuzion customers. So I'm going to go into the chargebacks and go to chargeback setup. Now, I'm not going to go over every field here today, but I am going to point out a few that I think are really interesting. The first is you get the ability to use different number series. So if you want to have purchase credit memos, that's what's going to be created when I bill back the supplier, and you want them in a different number series, then you want it on whatever you normally do for purchase credit memos and AP. We can do that. So that's a nice thing. Another is the reason code, what's listed in kind of the area, and I'll show you that as we process them. We can define that as well. Other things that I can set up as a default here at the chargeback setup for all types of chargebacks, and that's samples, free goods, depletion allowances, etc., is I can set a different vendor posting group. So I don't have to have two different vendor records. Now, I can if I want, and I'm going to show you that ability, but you can also keep it all in the same. So I'm going to show you an example here with Brown-Forman as an example. So I can keep everything within the same Brown-Forman vendor account and AP, or I can put that to a different vendor, and I'll show you that for depletion allowances. However, just because I'm using that same vendor, I don't have to use that same posting group. So as an example on what we do in InfusionGP right now is you have two different records. You have an AR record and an AP record. But even when you post to that AR, we go to, typically, most of you use a supplier AR instead of your default AR. So the same would go here. You could use a different AP instead of the default AP. Technically, you could also still post it to an AR, but it will be in your AP subledger. So I highly recommend you keep that as an offset AP account. So you can have typical AP, which is your inventory, other bills that you're paying, and then you can also have a separate AP just for chargebacks. So again, isolating that a little bit different, just like we do now on the AR side of the world. So I can name those posting groups. That's what's going to define how it's going to post to that AP account. I can name that here. So you can see I've set up one that's called DA. You also can actually do that for every type of chargeback, and we don't allow that now, but you can in here. So I'm not sure you would ever want to do this, but if you wanted to separate how much is DAs, billbacks, etc., into different GL accounts for the AP side of the world, you could do that here as well. Another kind of interesting thing is payment terms. So again, we're using that same vendor card, but we don't have to use the same terms. So if you have a set different terms than your inventory that you buy from that vendor, you can set up a different term. You can set that here at the chargeback setup for all chargebacks, and I will show you at the vendor card individually. You can override that per vendor as well. Now, another really neat feature that I'm going to dive more into here in a minute is these dimension groupings. So now your only option in our InfusionGP bill back process is to bill at the item. So we do a summary of everything you've sold at what DA unit amount, and that's what we bill back to the supplier for that item number. Now you have the ability to group that into different groupings. So as an example, there are some suppliers where maybe I'm going to use a flavors as an example. You might have multiple flavors of a different vodka or whatever product. And instead of billing back every single item, they want you to roll that together as a group and bill that back like by size. So you could do that in this scenario by using these dimension groups. So in this case, I've just done a brand and size, which isn't too much different than if I did the item. And I'm going to show you how that can roll up into the item, but really you get a choice of however you want to group that back to the invoice to the supplier. So some really great flexibility there to handle some things some of you might be doing manually at this point. Another really kind of neat thing to point out, in our InfusionGP solution, we offer 5 different DA buckets. We went and looked at all 3 distributors that are in our dev environment, because that's the benefit you get to the dev environment as we look specifically at your organizations and what buckets you're using. And what we found is most of you are using 2 buckets. to separate invoices. So one DA bucket 1 might go back to the supplier, and you might have a special instance that has to be billed separately on DA bucket 2. That DA bucket 2 might be back to your supplier rep or something else. The other thing you guys were using was what we call DA bucket 5 now, but we've done here in DA bucket 3, is using for cost adjustment. So making some entries that don't bill back to the supplier, but obviously these cost adjustments will go through for sales margin. So that's one way that you guys are using the system. So we built 3 DA buckets into the system here. The nice thing about this is that you can rename those. So in the sales line, if you're looking at that, our system just calls them DA1, DA2, DA3. You actually can have that have different names. So here I've left the first one DA1, but then I put a special DA. So I just put that as SDA. And then I put this one as a cost adjustment. So I did CDA. So then when I see those in my sales line, I understand a little bit better. So nice little feature that we built in there as well. So that's kind of highlighting some of the setup portions. Let's dive in a little deeper to a few of these so you can see in the setup of an item and a vendor, how does that really look? So I'm going to jump into my item card, my item list here. And I'm just going to open my first item, which is a gentleman jack. And I'm going to open the dimensions to that item. Now, you might have been on other webinars with us before as we've talked about dimensions. Dimensions is a really neat feature inside of Business Central that really goes throughout all of the system. Dimensions can be defaulted at an item, a vendor, a customer, and those can carry through into your GL, so you can post by different dimensions without expanding your chart of accounts. So I can analyze my financials better. In addition to that, you don't have to post everything to your financials. You can just leave dimensions for better sales reporting and other tracking methods. So this is an example where we're using dimensions for grouping. So on an item, I have set up a few different dimensions here. One of those is brand and size. So here I have a gentleman jack, and it's a 375. So that's going to be used. You'll see here in a little bit of how I want to group back to Brown Foreman when I build them back for my DAs. We still have case 1 DA. Your multiple DAs are still going to be listed in your pricing setup, which we'll do a different webinar on pricing setup. So that's the $5, buy 5, I get $2 DA. If I buy 10, maybe I get a $5 DA. Those different DA levels are related to your discount levels because they're price support. So that's still going to be in your deal setup. We're totally revamping that pricing module, so you don't have to use Inventive's deal module, but it will replicate the same kind of functionality for us to pass those deals over to Inventive. So I'm really excited about that, and that will come up in an upcoming webinar. However, I can also still keep a case 1 DA related at the item. We often call this an all case DA. Now, we actually have a little bit better functionality than we had in our InfusionGP. So this is just my price list for the item. Don't pay attention to these quantity levels. You wouldn't do that. We're still working on our price module, so I had to set up some different discount levels. Here you can see I have a frontline price. This is where you'll keep your front line. In addition, I have the DA associated to that frontline price. So again, my all case DA. I can do that differently for off-premise customers to on-premise customers. We found in a survey through the 3 of you that distributors that are in our dev environment right now, your all case DAs typically are the same for both on and off-premise. So you don't have to name that different. You can say all customers, so you don't have to list that twice like you did in our previous system. In addition to that, you do get dates. So dates can be used obviously for frontline. We already offered that in our InfusionGP, but now since the DA is listed with that, You can do different date ranges in order to have that DA change on your all case. Now, the case 1 DA here only picks up if I don't have something that is greater in my deal DA. We're still not combining those. So you either have, it picks up a case 1 DA or it picks up the deal DA. It's not going to add those together. So you would add that into your deal DA if you get both. So no different in our functionality that we offer for that right now in Infuzion as well, in GP. Another thing let's peek at, I'm just going to scroll down, and this is the primary vendor for this item, is V0013. Just going to click on my vendor here and jump to the vendor card. So this is my Brown-Forman vendor card, and I'm going to scroll down to the chargeback section here in the fast tab of that vendor card setup. The first thing that you can see is that this vendor has been turned on to allow depletion allowances. You do have the ability to turn off a vendor to say that we can't book any kind of depletion allowances to this vendor. In addition to that, here is where I can point to a different vendor. So if I didn't want the depletion allowance, the chargebacks to go to this vendor card to make the purchase credit memo to this card, I do have the ability to point it somewhere else. So where this may come in play is I have different ship point vendors that items are attached to for purchasing, just like we do now in Infuzion. And then this allows you to point to that main card that you plan on doing chargebacks to. Other things, though, that you have the ability to do is, let's say I don't want a different vendor, but maybe I want to separate the contact. I want it all to go to Brown-Forman, but I want the contact, the email address of who the invoice should be sent to be different. So you can do that here, billing contact 1 and billing contact 2. Specifically for DA, this references our DA bucket 1 and DA bucket 2. So if I want the DA bucket 1, which maybe is your standard depletion allowance, you're going to bill back to the supplier. Maybe I just want that a different contact than the purchasing contact that's listed here in the vendor card. You can assign that here. In addition, if I want something different on my DA bucket 2, which again might be the supplier rep, it needs to go to a different department, I can name a different contact. And I'll show you how that creates here. In this one, I've made it very obvious because the contact is my own name instead of the company's names. Now, you're going to notice that when I create those, it's still going to go to the same vendor card, but my email is going to be different. The name on the invoice is different. So again, you get some of those options in the system. Other things, again, if I've set an overall how that the grouping should happen at the setup of the chargebacks, I can override that here at the individual vendor. So if I want it grouped a different way, let's say on all the vendors for your bill backs, you do brand and size, but this specific one wants a different level of grouping for their items, you can do that specific to the vendor. So that's really exciting. We don't allow that flexibility now. It's item or nothing else. This one, I'll show you all those different levels that you can group things up to. Other things here, again, the posting group I set at the overall chargeback level, but if I did want specifically this to be posted differently to a different AP account or something to that extent, I can set those here. I can also set up different payment terms related to that too. Under our bill back side, so samples, same kind of concept. I can do different contacts. I can have then my bill back or the card here. I can do different payment terms, all of that kind of stuff as well. Same with free goods. So lots of flexibility on setup of the overall system as well as override at the vendor level as well. Let's look at one more thing before we jump into actually making a transaction and processing bill backs. So I'm going to go into my order type setup. And you've probably been on some webinars before where we've went through this. This is another feature that we added into the system. Order types are how you define what should happen to an order when it comes into the system. So we've used this in webinars where we showed like credit holds, and certain order types might need to go on a credit hold or process to that, or bill and holds. If you were on our bill and holds webinar, and how the order type really handles the processing of bill and holds. Another thing that you can do here is, again, whether or not this order type should allow depletion allowances, whether this order type is a sample. You do have the ability to have a default percentage at this sample. We do it per line item, but you can default back to the overall sample order type. So I'll show you that here in a minute. A feature they added for us was at the line level. So you don't need to put any kind of percentage here either. So just another couple things to help us identify what should be calculated on each of those order types. Now I'm going to go into my sales orders. And I've entered a couple sales orders here today that I'm just going to go over on what it looks like in the system. So I'm going to enter my first order type here. And as I scroll down, I have two items on here. I have my Gentleman Jack that we were just looking at, and I also have a free good. And this free good is flagged here. Again, if your state allows free goods, that will be an option for you in the system. I'm going to scroll over, and all of this would come in from my order entry system, Pocket Advantage, just like it does now, pass through the deals module. So the deal module will pass this pricing. Inventive gets this pricing and knows what to pass us back. So in this case, unrealistic, we'd have one in this guy. Oops, sorry. In this case, what's going to come over is our DA1, and you can see this is DA2 bucket, but I've renamed it, if you remember, so I can separate the invoicing for those two. So in here, I have a $1 DA to support my discount, as well as a $2 special DA that it's gathering. Again, brought all just like today, from the pricing itself, came in from the order, and it's going to put it into the line item so I can see it on the line of the order. And I can always go back to history and look at this as well. In this case, I have a free good. That's the second item. And I have a chargeback percentage of that of 75%. So it will take 75% of that cost and bring it over. Now, one thing to note that it is a little different than ours. Currently, if you go into our sales order line and hit line information, drill into our beverage DA window on a sales line, everything is listed in case value. In this case, what's going to come over here, if it is a bottle, it will divide this case value by the bottles per case. So this is a unit based on the unit of measure that you're purchasing. Just as a note, if you're looking at the sales order. Probably unlikely that you're really drilling down to that level, but at least know where it comes from. Over here, let's take a peek at a sample. So this is my sample order. The order type came over as sample, very similar to your order ID in GP right now. As I scroll down, I have an item here that is being sampled out. And if I scroll over, two different fields that come over, again, from the order entry side is my bill back percentage. So I'm billing back 50% of the cost of this item to the supplier. And the reason code. Again, these are definable. We set them up just like we do today and track those reasons that comes over with your order entry. Now you kind of have to dig a few levels and go into that Inventive Pocket Advantage additional window to see what that reason code is. Again, now it's just on the line here with that product information. So in this case, I had a reason code of new product. In Inventive, those percentages are tied to those reason codes. And then, of course, a manager can always override that in the approval process for samples as well. Nothing's changed about that side of it. So once I have my orders and I post that, then it starts to gather all that information in order to bill back. So now we're going to jump to, we have all this information posted. Now we're going to go to processing. So this is what you would have done in our InfusionGP solution through the depletions verification workbook. In this case, you're going to do that through inside BC in the 365 wine trade under chargebacks, process chargebacks. Now for DAs, we can take a peek and look at how DAs are building. And we'll do that here in just a little bit. We'll see that. But first, we'll just go ahead and process, and we can review those in the system as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up. Here I get a choice. Do I want to process DAs, samples, or free goods? And again, I'll come back and overview what bad bottles are. In this case, it will default to the reason code you set up in the chargeback selection. This is just a nice way to say, why are you doing it? A shortcut in sorting on reports. I've named this March depletions, but you can override this and call this whatever you want. This is the description that's going to show up on your purchase credit memo that you send out to the supplier. You can filter to the dates. In this case, I'm just doing March 1st because that's when I have some data into my test system, but obviously you do the whole month into processing. So I'm just going to hit OK. And then it's going to create for me all of the depletion allowances purchase credit memos, and it'll tell me how many it created. Now, I can, in addition, I could have filtered that down just to do one vendor. I don't have to do them all. So if I want to peek at one vendor, see what it is, I can do that as well. I'm going to go ahead and process the rest of these so we don't leave this window, but we can from here just pop to the purchase credit memo window and look at what it produced. But I'm going to go ahead, since I'm here, to be more efficient with our time today and process the rest of these. Then we can kind of see a mixture of everything when we go over there. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and process samples. Now, notice here, this is, again, an Infusion change for what we did, which was you could use the order type percentage, which is at that order type setup where it said it's always 100%. Or more than likely, you're going to use sales line percent. And that's based on the reason code in Inventive or the manager override. It came over with that percentage listed at the line. In addition to that, again, just to point out, I can do just one vendor or a range of vendors. I don't have to process them all, but in this case, I don't have very many, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit process on that. The next one I'm going to do is free goods. This was a complete new ad for us in Infusion, we again, same features. You can put a description, the reason code, and go ahead and put a date filter in there. So I just have a couple there. So again, difference than in InfusionGP, those would have been AR invoices at this point. Now we just get to pop over to the purchase credit memos and see those sitting out here. I have quite a few because I had some from earlier as well. Here are all my DA ones, and here are my sample and free goods. Let's take a peek. The first thing I want to look at here is showing you the vendor 13. So notice here I had 2 DA buckets. Now, one thing I didn't show you that let's go back and take a peek at. I had the ability in my processing of chargebacks to just do bucket 1 or just do bucket 2. Now, a difference from what the feature we offer now is if I choose total, it's actually not going to add the bucket 1 and bucket 2 together. It's going to build both of them together or on separate invoices. So I just don't have to do 2 rounds of it. So in this case, bucket 1 and bucket 2 will always be kept separate. And since I did total, it built both of them into an invoice. So for Brown Foreman, this is my March depletion allowances. Here I have one that's to vendor 13. Remember on my bucket 1, I didn't override with a contact, but on my bucket 2, I did override with a contact and I put the name as Corey Olson. Still going to vendor 13, still the same vendor, but the contact name, the email. Now I could have just done Brown Foreman as a name and the email be different. That's fine too. But this made it more dramatic for us to be able to see. Now, let's take a peek at a few of the other features inside of this purchase credit memo as well. Notice here that I have my brand size combination. So in this brand size combination, what it's doing is saying based on the cost part, it's going to add up my case equivalents of how much was billed at that case cost amount. So just like we do today, but we do it with item, it's doing a very similar thing here, but related to a grouping that you can define on the item itself. So let's pick another one here. So you can see here I have a dollar, a 2. I've sold 2 at the DA amount of $2, and I've sold, or 1, I'm sorry, at the $2, etc. So I have some funny little amounts that I've processed here, but all in testing. So those are kind of DAs as I'm billing that part back. Let's take a peek at samples. Now samples, I didn't choose to group on every single one of them. If I don't choose any kind of grouping, it's actually going to bill back the specific invoice. Now, this is an interesting concept as well, because many of you have asked that in the past, and instead you include a very detailed sample report because you have some suppliers that require very detailed information, typically on free goods and samples, not so much on DAs. If I don't do any grouping, the default in the chargeback module is to bill back at the invoice level. So it is very detailed. So notice here I have a sample that I've sent. It was on this invoice and it was for this specific item. So it's listing every item and every invoice. So you can just send this to the supplier. You're not having to bill that, send them an additional report as well. Now, you can still group it. I think my next one might be, let's find one. I did override at the vendor card. And here we go. On Bacardi samples, I chose to group that by the brand and size, because maybe they don't need a detailed invoice, or maybe they want a different type of report and I don't want that to be in my invoice. So either of those are fine too. So you can, again, group it, or I can leave it down to the detailed level and I can group it at any kind of level that I would like into the system. So lots of flexibility there as well. So these are still samples. I think if I just scroll, here we go. These are free goods that I have. Again, this is grouped at a little bit higher level, but I could leave that as a detail too, or brand size, again, whatever fits what I'm billing back. We still need to customize the invoice print on this, just like we do now, but it's not too much different as far as showing each one of these line items, just like we do today in your bill back invoice. So that still needs a little tweaking, but it's actually very close to what we do already today. Now, let's peek at the chargeback ledger entries that are made as I produced all of these, purchase credit memos. Now, as soon as I post these, they will post to whatever accounts I've set up related to these different types of chargebacks. So I have my, AP account. Maybe I've set that to a segregated AP account. And then, of course, I have whatever cost of goods offset I'm doing for those bill backs. That's the way it's going to post. And then it will create a credit out there onto the vendor that I can apply to my inventory invoices or other things, or wait until they send me information of how to apply that. And again, if they send you direct money, we'll also release to you in the future the process to move it from AR to AP. So very similar to what you do in GP today. A few different steps, but same concept. Okay, let's take a look at those chargeback ledger entries. So in depletion allowances, it works slightly different than free goods and samples. In depletion allowances, as soon as I post an invoice into the system, it creates a chargeback ledger entry. In this chargeback ledger entry, when I go here, anything that is not filled out here with a document number hasn't been billed back yet. So I can filter this and see just what has been processed and not yet invoiced back to the supplier. But over here to the right-hand side, I can see exactly what invoice, customer invoice that went out on, the date it went out on, how much was sold, at what depletion allowance amount, and I can see that in case equivalents or within the unit of measure it was sold in, like bottles, etc. And this is the DA unit amount of which it was sold out in. Now, as soon as I create those credit memos, over here on the left-hand side of my screen, you can see the credit memo number is now filled out. So it's holding there. If I go back in and delete that purchase credit memo, it just removes this. It doesn't mess up anything. I can continue to bill back stuff multiple times, just like you can in our depletion verification workbook. So if I go back and I say, into my purchase credit memos, and I'm like, this invoice wasn't right. We forgot something. I need to change something. Again, I can just delete it. I can make those corrections, and then I can re-invoice this to the supplier as well. And we'll talk about corrections just in a minute. So very helpful in this chargeback ledger entries window for depletion allowances. You can really see that. Now, this can be all personalized. We've shown this before multiple times, but personalization will let you add fields, let you move fields away, all of that great stuff. In addition to that, just like base BC on all of the different features, you can use analyze mode. So if I flip to analyze mode, I can save different things, and I can go ahead and do a pivot table. So this is really powerful. So I've done a pivot table here. I had one saved, but I'm going to create this one from scratch just so you can kind of see how that works. So I can do it by my vendor, and then I can do it by my item number, and then I can do it by maybe my unit amount here. Go. And maybe I don't want to see all of these different sums, so let's just see my quantity and maybe an amount here. So as I scroll down here, I can really easily see for this item, the $2 DA and how many, what's the dollar amount, how many I sold, etc. So really helpful information. Again, very similar to what you would have saw in the depletion verification window. We're going to add in a few things like the item description and the vendor name description that are kind of missing in some of this list, but very easy for us to do. So when you see this being finalized, you'll see those vendor names, not just the number into there. But this is very similar to what you get to see already in our depletion verification. So you don't have to go out of the system. You save this. I can save this with a smart date in my filter. So I can filter the posting date to current month. And when I do that, then it will automatically, or last month, it will automatically update, and I don't have to go out, pull information, refresh the information, all of that great stuff. It's just right here. Save what you want. So I'm going to say summary by vendor. This is only for you. You can share this with a coworker, but it doesn't automatically share, so their stuff doesn't junk up your list, which I think is really nice. So then when I go back to this analysis mode, you can see that summary by vendor is already right there. So again, I don't have to recreate the wheel every single month, and I also don't need to go out of the system. It just automatically does that for me as I'm in here. So that's a really powerful part to get to the same functionality we offer outside of the system. Now, again, all of this is inside of the system. DAs, of course, are the most high volume chargeback that you're going to do. But we do have chargeback ledger entries, obviously, for build back and free goods. The difference in build back and free goods is those ledger entries don't happen until I create that invoice. So they're not sitting out there prior to me invoicing. So I can create those invoices and maybe come back here to do some broader analysis, just like you would in the depletion verification. So it's just a little reverse step. You'd first create those invoices. You don't need to send them. They can just sit there. And then I can do an analysis if I feel like, hey, that's on target to what we expected. Again, I could look at each individual one on the invoice itself, or, you know, do my analysis here as well. So lots of options into that system. One open item that we have for development that's actually starting development now is our ability to change. So in our InfusionGP tool, you have two options to correct DAs without doing a return and rebill. So obviously that is a way to do it as well. But let's say you get towards the end of the month and you realize, we left out a DA, or we need to change a DA into the system. Your two options now in InfusionGP is we have a manual window inside of GP where you type in one at a time and what you want, and it makes a DA correction entry into the ledger here, is where that would go. And the second option you have in our system is outside of the system. You use a workbook to pull those sales, and you basically manipulate that in Excel and then import that to make mass those entries instead of you typing in each one. The positive of that is it lets you create that to a customer level versus you typing in each individual. What we plan on doing in our InfusionBC that isn't quite done yet is to make a journal. So I'm going to pull up, if you were a part of our allocation webinar, you probably already saw this window, but it's like a journal like any other journal in Business Central. This is for allocations to add allocations into the system. Very similar, we plan on having one for chargebacks. So there'll be a chargeback journal, and that will allow you to do an entry to a DA, a bill back, or a free good. And then you will be able to put the item, the customer number, and then plus or minus that DA unit amount and the quantity to which you want to plus or minus. Now, what will happen in here is you can paste that from Excel. So we'll have different Excel exports where you can narrow down what you want in the sales line posted view. If you want to say, hey, show me all the ones where I had a $5 DA or it was on this deal ID, all of that is available in our posted sales DA. You can narrow down to what you want, make that change plus or minus, and then you would just paste it into here. So then a little bit easier as far as the process and a lot more flexible for us to do. So that's upcoming, is that allocation journal for you to make those entries. Now, we also reevaluated how everybody's using those chargebacks and why they're using those. And so we are, again, trying to address the issues. Not that there always will be mistakes that people will need to correct, But there's definitely some mistakes that we see happening because of a lack of alerting to say, hey, those DAs are hitting you below a gross profit level, and addressing that timely into your actual pricing. So obviously we're addressing those more core issues, so hopefully you have less adjustments as a goal into the system as well. The last thing I want to kind of overview with you is the bad bottle process. So we have an RTV, return to vendor process inside of GP. Nobody really uses that. The way that most distributors we have found use bad bottles is you might receive them throughout the year and then you adjust them out. And most of you kind of track that on an Excel spreadsheet and you bill back to the supplier possibly at the end of the year or once a quarter. You don't do it right away. And in GP's process, it's kind of expecting you to do that right away. And because of that, it's not a great process. We don't actually train people on how to use that. But the bad bottle bill back process is actually allows you to pin up and save, and you determine when you want to bill it back, and it will segregate it and track it for you. So I think it's really an attractive feature that while a lot of you might not have used a feature in our Infuzion GP solution, I think you will like this solution here. So let me just trace back real quick to give you a visual of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go into my posted purchase credit memos because I've already posted one through the system, and we'll trace back how I did that. So let's start at the end. I build back the supplier. I build back Constellation for a product here of 6 bottles that were bad at some point. And again, this could have been from any time frame. So let's drill into this item and see what I did with this item in order to gather this. In the bad bottle setup, you name a virtual warehouse that you want to store these bad bottles. So in this case, I have named that virtual warehouse returns. And what I did was I did a reclassification journal, which is the same as kind of like an inventory adjustment, but I just moved it. I received the inventory into my warehouse because that's normally what happens. And then I moved that inventory into a returns warehouse location. That means it took it out of my on-hand inventory for this item, moved it to a different location so I couldn't sell it. In addition to that, you can have that separate warehouse with a different inventory account. So the value of that is sitting over in a segregated inventory if I wanted that to be segregated. You can keep it the same inventory account. That's up to you. Once it's over here, I can just let things pinned into this returns. I can have a mixture for all different vendors. It doesn't have to be just this vendor, so mix it and match, doesn't matter. I can have some Brown-Forman, I can have some Constellation, I can have all my other different vendors into this returns warehouse. Then when I decide to bill that back to the supplier, I just do that process bad bottles. Now it knows I want to bill it back because 1, I went to this specific location. And 2, when I did this journal, and I'm going to see if we can see that column on my posted document here, maybe not. When I did this journal, I named a reason code, and that reason code is tagged with my bill back. So here in this case, I've said, hey, this needs to be returned, and that's the reason code over to there. Now it'll sit in this warehouse until I create the credit memo. When I create the credit memo, it automatically creates it onto the location I have named for those bad bottles to go out of. So you can see here I had 6 in there, and now I've removed those 6 from that warehouse. And then it billed it back. So again, you could do that at any time frame you want. It just helps you not to have a list in Excel and then you manually make the invoice back to the vendor. And it does it as a purchase credit memo, just like the rest of our chargebacks. So then again, I can apply that to a invoice. If I want to do it right away, you could do it that way. as well. Now, of course, I could return the product, but as most of us know, that works sometimes. The process is I receive it, then I find out it's faulty, and I'm going to return it, and they're going to give me a purchase credit minimum. I'm going to resolve it at the time I'm paying the invoice. That would be a separate process that you would do in our normal inventory processing. This is more saying, hey, I'm not going to do it that way. They said just to gather up those bad bottles and or cases or whatever you have. And then at the end of the year or quarter, then your month, maybe even, you're going to bill them back. So nice little feature. Again, not a lot of people use that all the time in our system because we don't, in GP, because we don't really offer a great solution to pin those up easily without causing clutter into the system. Great, so that's kind of our overview. I know that's a very high level overview of chargebacks, but hopefully you get a vision of all the flexibility and functionality we're offering, as well as how we're really embedding all of those same kind of features we offered in Infuzion GP just inside of Business Central, so you're not doing all those workbooks outside of the system. So now Toby's going to go ahead and unmute everyone, and we're going to take any questions that you have, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And you might have to unmute yourself if you have any. Toby will unmute everyone here.
Yeah, everybody should be able to unmute themselves now.
Yeah. So any questions for us? If you liked what you saw here today and want more information on next steps or to see more about our wine and spirits solution on Business Central, please email us at info@infuzion.com, give us a call with the number on the screen, or visit our website, infuzion.com. Check out the wine and spirits resource page where you can see other features that we've released for preview as well. Thanks.